It's a somewhat quiet and very thankful episode of Frogs Insider right now. Hey, Frog fans, welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider. Jamie Plunkett here. Melissa Treebosser will be along shortly, as she always is, for our preview episode. She's talking to Scott Springer of the Cincinnati Enquirer on this episode to preview TCU against Cincinnati, the final regular season football game for TCU this season. Looking forward to you guys hearing that preview. Very excited for you guys to hear it. If you're wondering, Jamie, you sound a little quiet. Are you trying to be quiet? Yes. Yes, I am, because I'm in the middle of smoking a turkey, and I realized that I hadn't done this yet, and it's 4:13 in the morning on Thanksgiving morning right now. So we are quiet to try and avoid waking the children and the wife, all of which would be terrible and bad. But I did want to get on, make sure that you guys had your episode, and talk a little bit about what's coming up this week in the world of TCU athletics and some of the news that's happened earlier in the week of TCU athletics. We're going to get into some of the JUCO commits that TCU has landed for the 2025 recruiting class and what that means or is indicating about this, where Sonny Dykes and this staff are, where TCU is in its recruiting cycle and its development cycle at this point. But before we get into any of that, we do obviously have to talk about our lovely sponsors over here, the Flying Tea Club, the presenting sponsor of this podcast. Very thankful for them. Love what they're doing for TCU. If you don't know, the Flying Tea Club is TCU's official NIL collective. They currently support over 130 student athletes. So last week when you heard the episode, you're like, Jamie, you said 110. Yeah, it's 130 now. They've been adding students this fall, which is great. Because if they're adding student athletes, that means you're supporting them in a really healthy and good way. The Flying Tea Club creates meaningful opportunities that benefit both student athletes and the Fort Worth community by connecting athletes with local charities. I've talked about a couple of those charities in the past. They're excellent. Presbyterian Night Shelter is one of my favorites that they worked with recently. And if you give to the Flying Tea Club, you know that your gift is going towards meaningful work in and around the city of Fort Worth, not just paying people, right? Obviously, student athletes deserve to get paid, and the Flying Tea Club makes sure that they get paid. But your gift is doing more than just a payment, essentially, if that makes sense. It's also, very fun fact, tax deductible, 100% tax deductible, because the Flying Tea Club is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And now, I mean, we're getting to the end of November. We're getting into the holiday season. Now's the best time to make a gift because you can get it in under the wire, get that tax deduction. It's absolutely incredible. And you get the Horned Frog priority points, right? So it's a double win because you get the priority points. It's tax deductible. It's triple win because it's going to student athletes. It's quadruple win because the student athletes are working with local organizations to make our city better. It's a win-win-win-win. So why wouldn't you get over to flyingteaclub.com right now and make a gift? It can be a one-time gift. You can set a recurring gift for a monthly gift. You can have a corporate partnership inquiry if you own your own company and want to partner with the Flying Tea a little bit more significantly. Any way you go, your support directly impacts student athletes and the larger Fort Worth community. Make your tax deductible end of your gift over at flyingteaclub.com today. Also, big thanks to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network. You can find our show in that feed wherever you get your podcasts. All you've got to do is search for Republic of Football Network and it will show up. You'll get our show. You'll also get a D1 football podcast for every single D1 program in the state of Texas. That's TCU, SMU, Baylor, Tech, Texas, and Texas A&M. Probably two good episodes to listen to this week as those two schools revive their rivalry on Saturday. A lot of good stuff happening across the Republic of Football Network these days. Very excited to be a part of that as well. If that's too much for you, though, just search for Frogs Insider. You'll get our feed. It's got extra stuff in it that's not in the Republic of Football feed, and you'll never miss out on an episode. Just search Frogs Insider wherever you get your podcasts, and we're right there. Also, make sure you get over to the YouTube channel as well. We're got some really cool stuff coming up, guys. I teased on Twitter about a month ago now that I was working on a series called Horned Frogs Flashbacks. and I was going to take a look at significant moments throughout TCU's athletics history. And the first one is dropping on Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Central Time. Go to the YouTube channel, and you'll see it. We're talking about the Immaculate Deflection from the Rose Bowl. It's about 15 minutes, not too long, but it's an in-depth look at the significance of that moment in TCU history. So very excited for that to drop. We're going to try and do about one a month, maybe a little bit, but one every 6 weeks or so, because they are a little time intensive. But excited for you guys to hear that and watch that over on the Frogs Insider YouTube channel. So make sure that you're getting over there and checking that out. All right. That does it for podcast business and promotion work. So let's go ahead and just jump straight in to the final regular season preview of the year. This is Melissa Treebwasser sitting down with Scott Springer of the Cincinnati Enquirer to talk about TCU-Cincinnati coming up on Saturday, 5 p.m. Central Time on ESPN+. Let's jump in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Frogs Insider podcast here for Cincinnati Preview Week, brought to you, as always, by the fine folks at the Flying T Club and, of course, our partners at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. As we dive into the final regular season game this year, I am happy to be joined by Scott Springer, Cincinnati Bearcats beat reporter for Cincinnati Enquirer and Cincinnati.com. Scott, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yes, always glad to be with the Horned Frogs. You know, this is the Cohen Bowl. It's Mark Cohen, SID, and his son David works up here with the Bearcats.
That's right. I had forgotten about that, but it's true. We will have a happy Mark Cohen post game either way. I have a feeling, which is a great thing to see. I had one of my favorite pictures I took during Saturday's game had a very happy Mark Cohen in the background as Savion Williams scored a touchdown. So always love to see Mark smiling one way or the other. Scott, let's dive right into this matchup. This is the first time these teams have played in 20 years, almost exactly. The last matchup was way back in 2004. Cincinnati got the win. They actually lead the all-time series 2-1. These old, very shortly conference mates, but a new rivalry could be brewing. An interesting game on deck. You and I kind of talked pregame about the weather and how that might impact things. Tell me what 30 degrees in Ohio feels like.
It's not comfortable. I don't like it. I'm from here. I did live 5 years in Tampa a long time ago and wondered why I moved, but I'm from here, and the weather can change, much like Texas in a way. It can just change within a couple days. So, as we're recording this, it was 60 maybe earlier today. It's dropping all week. Saturday's high is 32, which tells me by game time it's going to be in the 20s. And I know the next day, the high is only 20-something with lows in the teens. So it's bundle up. They do not have heaters by the seats. They will have heaters, on the field for the players, whatever they can do. But yeah, it's a different animal. So it could affect both teams, to be honest, because Cincinnati's not played in a game that cold yet this season either.
Well, Cincinnati's season, as we transitioned into that, has been interesting. Not a lot expected out of this club coming into the year. I think they were picked to finish near the bottom of the Big 12 Conference. And early on, it looked like they were set to overachieve. Started out, they have some really impressive conference wins. They beat UCF, kind of started the tailspin for UCF, and then beat an Arizona State team that looks primed to be in the Big 12 Conference. But since that win at home against the Sun Devils, they've lost 4 straight. Now, mind you, 4 straight against 3 of the better teams in the league, including Colorado, Iowa State, and Kansas State. And so their schedule has been super backloaded. When you look at kind of big picture, how do you classify this season? Is it disappointing? Is it right where you expected the Bearcats to be? Where do they stand with one game left to play?
Well, I'm far from a prime prognosticator, but this is about where I expected the season to be. On the other hand, I'll tell you, when they were 5-2, and they really should have been 6-2 at that point, because they really should have the 6 wins already. They should not be sweating this game out whatsoever, because you go back to game 2, and they played Pitt, and they were leading 27-6 late in the third quarter. And I don't know how you lose a game like that, but they figured out a way to do that.
TCU did the same thing against UCF at home, and those
Right.
comes back to
Yeah.
haunt you.
It can absolutely come back to haunt you. And right now, you're in a loser or go home situation. Although I think there are some scenarios where 5 and 7 teams can get into bowl games, but I don't think they're thinking about that right now. But yeah, at 5 and 2, and it was a pretty convincing win over Arizona State. Now, granted, they had to come, and you had the time zone issue, and it was a noon kick and all that stuff. But it works for everyone in this conference. You're traveling and all that, and I don't know. It's just you look at teams that they beat. They had a very convincing win over Houston here, 34-0. Then Houston turned around and beat TCU, and Houston beat the team that the Bearcats played last week, Kansas State. And Kansas State looked like world beaters last week. They just looked awesome. Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens, and you just don't know in this conference. It's just like basketball. Every game is just nip and tuck. And if you say you know what you're talking about in the Big 12, you don't know what you're talking about, because it's a free for all. It's a crazy league. This is definitely a game that they need. And then the whole thing is, can you circle the wagons and get the guys back on board? Because you drop 4 straight, and then things start to change attitude wise. I know I saw TCU had an offensive lineman go in the portal already, and today UC had a cornerback went into the portal, a kid that was starting earlier in the season. So in this crazy world, that they all can jump ship and go on and take their toys and go somewhere else. And then you wonder, it's like, well, heck, if you make a bowl game, who plays? What team do you get?
Well, yeah, and I think that's going to be the big question at TCU too. And this time, when you look at some of the seniors on this roster, we'll expect all of them to play on Saturday, but after that, it's anybody's guess. You mentioned this, and I was gonna ask about it too, but you said circle the wagons. There have been some rumblings and some rumors that this is a team that has maybe lost its buy-in, maybe some dissatisfaction with coaching, different things like that. That's social media rumors. What do people know? But have you seen anything that makes you feel like the Bearcats are kind of throwing in the towel, or do you expect them to rally and give the performance that could get them into a bowl game?
Well, we'll know a lot more Saturday about 10 p.m., I guess. But I don't know. When you drop 4 straight and you're 5 and 2 and you drop 4 straight, I think it's natural for guys to get down. They do have a leadership group that meets. Dante Corleone is one of them. Corey Kiner is one of them. Different leaders, Gavin Gerhardt, their starting center. So there's some definite buy-in guys. And then it goes to reason when you turn your team over. And this is what we're looking at with college sports anymore, because Cincinnati had, I believe it was 46, 47 new players and about 25 or 6 from the portal. So, this culture thing, it has to happen like now. You don't have 2-3 years to work on culture and develop players. You got to get them in now. And if kids aren't buying into it and they're looking to go to their girlfriends over the holidays and all that, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what goes into the minds of 18 to I guess it's now 25 or 6. I mean, heck, there's
30-year-olds. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is, if you watch the end of Animal House and they say Senator John Blutarski is 12th year of college, you're looking at that now with college football. I mean, Oklahoma State's quarterback 7th year. And I think I was reading about your offensive lineman that's moving on, and he's been 6 years at
6
TCU.
years. Yeah.
I mean, dude ought to have 3-4 degrees at this point, but and it's the same for everybody. So I just don't know. I'd love to give you an honest answer. I haven't. You have to figure there's some rumblings and people unhappy. I think people are disappointed. They thought this was definitely going to be a bowl team, and now you're fighting and scraping for the bowl. I mean, I think people with the start, we're looking at maybe 7 or 8 wins, and now you're scrapping for 6. So a bowl was something that they're definitely interested in. And I've heard that from the higher ups. So, and the obvious thing too is when you qualify for a bowl, you get 15 extra practices, which benefits some of the other players and these players that have redshirted. As I understand the rules now, everybody can play. Yeah. So that could make the games interesting. Somebody that you were redshirting could could come and play and maybe make a difference.
Well, let's talk a little bit about administration and the higher ups. Scott Satterfield was not exactly deemed a exciting hire from outside, right? I think a lot of people kind of went, "Huh, interesting." But it seemed early on that he had gotten this team to buy in, that they were on the right track. But with the 4-game losing streak and the potential of not making a bowl this season, do you think his seat has gotten hot at all? Are they willing to kind of see this out and understand the transition they're making? Where does he stand when it comes to his future with the program?
Well, I could be wrong, but I don't see Cincinnati as like a Texas A&M where they can just, bite the bullet on 50, 60 million bucks and let Jimbo Fisher go. Jimbo Fisher, by the way, a 1-year offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bearcats.
He is available.
Oh, yeah, I think he's way out of their.
And cheap.
Oh, yeah. Scott Satterfield's buyout, as I understand it, is 19 million bucks.
Wow.
And that's a lot to blow off if you were to make a change. And I've not had the indication that's coming. Everything I've heard is, tighten the belts and let's go. And, they're giving him a chance to develop. And it only goes down to about 13 and a half or 13.3, I think, at the end of next year. So unless there's a big donor that comes in and says, hey, this is not working, I don't see anything changing. And, are the results good? No. Here's the deal, though. They came into the Big 12 a year before they expected. And one of the things I heard last year, and that was a 3-9 season, and really should have been a 6-win season if you look at what happened last year. But one of the things I heard from the GM personnel people was they didn't look like a Big 12 team. They weren't as big. They needed to be deeper. And so they went out, they tried to get bigger and deeper and faster and all those things. So on the hoof, I think that they made it back to that point. But what you notice is they tend to lose, even going back to last year. They've lost a lot of games where they have outgained the other team in total offense. So if you were just looking at the stat sheet, you'd say, oh, this is a 6-7 win team. And then somehow they lost games. Somehow they found ways to lose rather than finding ways to win. And that's been a theme for the past 2 seasons. So if there's a complaint against Scott, and in the end, he has to take the heat because he's getting the money, that would be the complaint. It's like you got to find a way to finish games and finish the season. In the latter part of the season, in both seasons, they've not done well. They've started last season started 2-0. This season, you had the disappointing loss to Pitt, but then you start 5-2. I'd predicted them to start 4-0, and I said this is why I think they can make a bowl game, because they get a 4-0 head start, in my opinion. And then all you have to do is win 2. But like you said, the back part of the schedule has been pretty brutal. They just haven't found a way to win. They find ways to get close, but we're not horseshoes and hand grenades here. It's college football, and the only numbers that matter are the ones at the end on the tote board.
It's one of my favorite sayings, horseshoes and hand grenades. One of the ways to get over the hump is to have a good quarterback. And it seems like the Bearcats have one, and Brendan Sorsby started out, really kind of jumped onto the scene and looked like he had a chance to be in that upper tier. Struggled a little bit down the stretch, again, with the uptick in competition. Obviously has something to do with it. But he's a guy that still has a couple of years of eligibility. How do you kind of quantify his performance, and where do you think he can have success against a TCU team that is prone to giving up some big plays and some yardage, but did do a really good job against a really talented quarterback and receiver duo in Arizona last week?
Well, they have to kind of decide what they're going to do with him, because early in the season, he was throwing the ball quite a bit. In Cincinnati, the last few years, most Satterfield offenses have averaged 200 yards rushing. So they're at like 181 now. So they were throwing the ball more earlier in the year, and then they've gotten to more where they're running the ball. And then at Iowa State, they only throw for 66 yards because Sorsby runs for 143 and Kiner had 120. So they do like to run the ball, and certainly if it's going to be 25 degrees, I suspect they're going to run the ball. That doesn't really help the throwing game much unless Hoover has some magical gloves. We'll see. You never know.
We don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just they tend to want to run the ball. Then last week, Kansas State really jumped on the run, and they had stopped Kiner early on, and they stopped Sorsby early on, and then they had to throw. But see, once they were able to throw, that opened up the run, and Kiner finishes with 140 yards. So you hear that word balance a lot. You do need it. It used to be balance when you heard an offensive coordinator say, well, we got to have balance. That meant to me they didn't want to pass the ball. They just want to run, because that's just one of those terms. But yeah, one does lead to the other. I just think they have to decide for sure what they want. If you're going to let him throw the ball, let him throw the ball. Don't restrict him. He's a playmaker, and with playmakers, sometimes they mess up, and he has messed up. I mean, he had 3 crucial turnovers against West Virginia that lost that game, because that was 17 free points, and that was a game, if you looked at the offensive stats, you would say, how in the world did Cincinnati lose to West Virginia? But that's the way the losses have been. They've been disappointing and hurtful like that, and memorable like that, where you're just pulling your hair out and going, what in the heck did I just watch?
This is sounding so much like TCU's 2023 season, where you look and you go, man, the talent is there, the opportunities are there. This team just can't get over the hump. So I can empathize. I think TCU fans can kind of empathize with that. You brought up Corey Kiner, and you know that you have an elite skill player when you see the SEC message boards just start going. I don't think Cincinnati can keep him. Super talented player, super talented running back. What is it about his abilities that has made this such a great season and made him such a great player for the Bearcats this year?
He just doesn't give up. I mean, he's yards after contact. I think going into the Kansas State game, he was number 2 in the country in forced missed tackles. So usually it looks like he's only going to get 2 yards, and he gets 4, and he keeps going, and he finds ways to get more yards, and he breaks free quite a bit. Now he's faster than he was. He's not as fast as Evan Pryor, the other back that you'll see, because Pryor is the one that's been able to break some bigger runs, through the pass, and also, running outside mainly and things like that. But Kiner's just a tough guy, and he's a native Cincinnati, and as far as him going anywhere else, unless I'm wrong, I think he's done. He had a season at LSU, and this is his 3rd season here, and so his first season was 2021. So he's not part of that COVID year, and he hasn't had a redshirt year. So I don't know, unless they're putting in a new rule that allows kids, years for the heck of it. I think he's done.
Okay, I'd heard people talking about him, but I did. Let me. I've got the roster pulled up right here. He is indeed a senior. It looks like he's a 4-year senior. So, yeah. And like you said, in this day and age of college football, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But theoretically, the COVID bump year is over. So this would be his final year. Overall, as an offense, you've kind of touched on that. That they tend to want to run the ball. We'll probably see that more. That has been a weakness of TCU's defense, though. Now we saw it with getting Cooper McDonald and Marcus Steele back. They looked a lot more stout against the run, did great against the Wildcats. Where else is Cincinnati strong on the offensive side of the ball? How have they been scoring their points this season?
Against Kansas State, it was Tony Johnson who was a receiver that came through in the portal. And Johnson and Sorsby, I believe, hooked up 8 times. It's the second time they've had 8 together, because he had 8 receptions against UCF. But their big play guy has been Xavier Henderson, who's number 8, former Florida Gator, and he's been their top receiver. But here in the last handful of games, teams have found ways to stop him, and Cincinnati's really struggled throwing the ball deep. They just haven't had much there. Teams have been dropping defensive backs back, and they haven't had much of a deep game at all. They've got a great tight end who was way underutilized against Kansas State. He only caught 1 pass, Joe Royer, 6'5", 255, and he's another local high school kid, but Ohio State transfer. He looks like an NFL player. I think he does have another year. He could possibly come out, but I think he's at 43 catches, and the record for a Cincinnati tight end is 45 by Travis Kelce, who turned out to be pretty good.
There's a pretty good history about tight ends there in Cincinnati. So
Yeah, they have had some good ones, and he's certainly capable of it. It's been puzzling that they haven't been able to get him involved. Now, I'm sure the other teams are well aware of Joe Royer, and they're doing things to stop him. But he's just somebody you maybe need to force the ball. The playmakers have to have the ball, or they can't do anything. Simple as that.
yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I think the linebacking unit was something that was considered a strength coming into the season and has been pretty solid, but that could be a really tough matchup for TCU on Saturday with that amount of size at the tight end position. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. Defensively, generally, when you find ways to lose instead of ways to win, a lot of the onus on that falls on the defensive side of the ball. Do you feel like that has been an issue for Cincinnati this year? Where have they been strong defensively, and where are they being exploited by opposing offenses?
Well, it's the 3-3-5 defense that Iowa State runs, and Kansas State runs a version of it. And the
TCU
idea
tried
is,
to run, and it was not pretty.
yeah. Well, I don't know that I'm a fan necessarily, but they don't really inquire what I think. But the defensive backs, they've just struggled. They're a lot better than they were, this crop of them, but still they do get picked apart. The linebackers are strong. Jack Dingle got a transfer. Jake Golday from Central Arkansas. I don't know how they found this guy, but he's led them in tackles. And Jared Bartlett has had a great year. He's the sack leader. He's a West Virginia transfer, and he's helped in leadership ways because he's the Mountaineers went to a bowl game last year. He's been there and things like that. So linebackers are strong. Dante Corleone, he's a guy everyone asks about him. He's just a monster-looking dude, about 6'1", 320, and I don't know how to describe him. It's like a wall with hands and feet. But he doesn't, if you look at his numbers, he doesn't really have like a ton of sacks, a ton of tackles. But if you watch the tape, he's occupying 2 and 3 guys almost every play.
Yeah.
And that's, in theory, if 2 guys are on him, someone else ought to be free. And they lost some defensive linemen earlier in the year to injuries. Otherwise, they might have had a better situation there. So linebackers are strong. Dante's pretty strong there in the middle. The defensive backs are better, but obviously Josh Hoover's found ways to complete a ton of passes. What is he, number 5 or 6 in the nation, throwing the ball yardage wise and touchdowns. And I would suspect they're going to throw again based on the numbers, or at least try to. And really the only thing Cincinnati might be able to hang their hat on is the weather.
Which could certainly have an impact. The biggest thing TCU has hung its hat on over this 4-1 stretch across both bye weeks has been Savion Williams. Frogs have a massive wide receiver that has incredible speed that they moved to running back and has been running a lot out of the Wildcat.
How many 6'5" running backs are there? I saw that, and then I've seen his numbers, and I see these listed at receiver, but then you see these rushing numbers. It's like, well, that's a lot of end arounds. He's doing more than just running those.
He's fully lining up in the Wildcat, and we've seen him run the ball out of the backfield. We've seen him pass the ball out of the backfield. We've seen him catch passes out of the backfield. He has been quite the Swiss Army knife. He's been favorably compared to kind of a Deebo Samuel type, which obviously is very high praise. What could a player with that size and speed out of the backfield do to, like you said, a defensive line that has one of the elite players in the country in Dante Corleone, and an incredible story? I know everybody was so happy that he got a clear diagnosis, was able to come back and play this year, because I know that looked like it was in doubt. But that has been kind of beset by injuries. Is that something that Cincinnati has seen this year, or do you think that it'll be another big day for Savion Williams?
Oh, if they're not pinpointing that guy, then they don't know what they're doing. Because that's he's bigger than Taj Brooks, who gave him fits, and bigger than DJ Giddens, who gave him fits. They had some success against Cam Scatteraboo, kept him under 100. They had some success against Harvey from UCF and kept him under 100. But this is a different animal here that can do both. And so I don't know. I mean, they're going to have to cook up something. And obviously, if you're you're focusing on Williams running the ball, then your receivers are going to go loose. It's just it's not the best of matchups for the Cincinnati defense, and not to say that they can't come up with something, because they have played good defensive games. And if you look at UCF's numbers, UCF is one of the top rated offenses, and they shut them down.
Yeah.
There was a 19-13 game, and Cincinnati probably left a couple scores behind in that one even. So they're capable of playing big games. They shut out, Houston. Again, Houston's not a powerhouse, but
they whipped up on TCU in Fort Worth. So
right.
Yeah,
a shutout's a shutout. A shutout in big boy football is pretty impressive. But then on the other hand, Kansas State did what they wanted. 41 points. There was no stopping them, and everyone knew Avery Johnson was going to run the ball. Heck, all you had to do was watch Chris Kleiman's press conference a week before, where he said, I think we need to run our quarterback more. Then on the first series, the dude gets 54 yards. It's like, well, did we not watch that press conference?
Apparently not.
It's mind-boggling. And I don't mean to point fingers at coaches and all that. I'm sure they're trying, but things like that just it pulls your hair out. That's why I wear a hat.
Yeah, I would imagine covering college football professionally for a while can do that to a person. I don't ask for score prediction. I prefer to ask the question this way. If Cincinnati is to pull off the win, I think it's a 3-point spread in favor of TCU, so about 6 points when you consider it's a home game for the Bearcats. But if Cincinnati wins, what has gone right? If they fail to win and qualify for a bowl, what has gone wrong on Saturday night?
If they don't qualify for a bowl, it's just terribly disappointing that it's somewhere along the line you have to say that you lost the team, or the coaches have to take that on themselves, because it's real tough to have a 5-2 start and then drop the next 5. Now, granted, the league's pretty good. This is not the American conference that they were in, and some people don't understand that. Even last year, I defended them a little bit with the 3-9 season. I said, heck, if you were in the American, you easily would have won 7-8 games and been to your bowl game. This is big boy football. When you commit, when they give you all this money, much is expected, and so this is big boy football. If you see us to win, Cincinnati, Williams is definitely somebody you got to hold him down. You can't let him run free like he did. I mean, well, just stopping TCU had 6 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. If you give up 6 rushing touchdowns, you're not winning. Simple as that. So they have to, stop that run, and then somehow figure out how to stop the receivers and Hoover. And then I'm going to bring the weather into it, because, let's see how Hoover and TCU can throw the ball in that weather. And if they do, it's not going to be a good night for the Bearcats. But I don't think TCU's played in at least as cold of weather as this. And I believe I looked it up since 22. They went to Waco, and it might have been 39.
I was at that game. I had food poisoning. That is probably the second worst experience I've ever had in person in a football game. The Baylor TCU, I think it was 2017, with a 2.5-hour rain delay, was slightly worse. That was pretty. And we played in Utah and Salt Lake, but it was like in the 50s, like the low 50s, high 40s. So yeah, that probably tracks. It's probably been 2 years. Very different TCU teams in 2022 and 2024 as well, with what their strengths were. So I think the weather will be a factor for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I hate using that because it's such an obvious thing, and it comes down to players. But a good many of the players are used to a little bit of cold compared to, TCU might not be used to it. But as I told you, I've been in Fort Worth, and the Fort Worth Bowl 2003 was the coldest one I ever did. And I know last year after a basketball game at Baylor, I had to drive back to Dallas. And I got in my rental car, and it was 11 degrees. And I said, wait a second, I'm in Texas.
Is weird.
It's 11 degrees.
Yep.
And that was just, and I couldn't figure out, you get in a rental car and you don't know where the heat is and everything. And I got the air on. It was miserable, but
That'll happen here. It is but like they say, if you don't like the weather in Texas, just wait 5 minutes because it will change. I'm gonna ask you one more question that I hadn't intended on asking, but just because you have been around college football for a long time, you've seen Cincinnati through multiple conferences. Cincinnati and TCU have both really had to fight tooth and nail to get these opportunities. Both earned spots in the playoffs that they said they weren't deserving of. TCU gets, blown out in the national championship. Cincinnati had a tough first round game. These teams are not that dissimilar in their history. All of that to say, when you see the shots being fired about the Big 12 conference, when Cincinnati gets a lot of the side swipes that TCU is getting for what happened, we saw Nick Saban kind of talk crap about TCU making it in 2022. We look at the scenarios that it looks like the Big 12 is very realistically going to get left out of the playoff this year. When you look at this conference as a whole, and you've mentioned the depth and the talent in it, do you think that this conference deserves more respect on the level that, maybe not the Big 10 and the SEC, but at least where the ACC is being featured? What are your thoughts about the Big 12 conference as a whole and where it belongs in the conversation in greater college football?
I think it would be an outrage if a Big 12 team is left out, and I guess it's unfortunate that BYU lost because they were going to go in, easily, but that Arizona State looked pretty good. And I don't know. I think they need to look at it more like they look at basketball, because why does everyone say Big 12 basketball is good? Because night in and night out, you don't know. And there's 5-6 teams ranked in the AP top 25 basketball wise as of today. And football, you're seeing something similar. And I think a lot of it has to do with the portal and the way things have kind of evened out, and there's some parity coming. And I think you're going to see more of it because of these roster limits. If they're going to go to 85, a lot of teams are going to be cutting loose 10, 15 guys that are good enough to play, but they can't afford to have them on the roster. So I think you're going to see more and more parity. And then with the kids having the freedom to leave, things are going to even up some. So I think it's a pretty good league. I don't know. Maybe you can't really line up I don't know Boise State's schedule. I've been to the Blue Turf. I know Boise State is good every year, and I remember the game against Oklahoma where they knocked them off, and that was great fun. But I don't know. I would challenge anyone to play the Big 12 schedule and see how that comes out. Pitt was on top of the ACC most of the season, and like I said, I saw Cincinnati just dominate that game until the fourth quarter implosion. So every teams have games like that where things go awry and you don't win the ones you're supposed to. But on the whole, I've been impressed by the teams that I've seen, and then even some of the teams that you didn't think were all that, they turn around and knock people off. So it's parity, it's even, and I don't know. You can't have Brett Yormark calling the referees and saying, "Hey, let this team win." You got to let nature take its course. It's just there's a lot of even teams, and they're pretty good. And I think they should, at the very minimum, get one spot.
Yeah, and a 12-team playoff, the Big 12 being left out, will be a travesty, but it certainly looks like we are heading to that as a realistic possibility. And if you ask Utah, Brett Yormark did make a call at halftime to keep BYU that win, but I think we all know the reality of that situation. Scott, thanks so much for joining me, talking about the Bearcats. This will be only the second game this season I've missed. It's my first road game I won't be attending, but when I looked at the weather, I was okay with my decision as well.
Yeah,
so
you'll be warm. So
yeah, I will be warm.
watch.
Tell people where they can find your work and where they can follow you talking Cincinnati Bearcats football and basketball and everything else.
All right. The newspaper, which is, I don't have one down here. Yeah, I do. Here. One of these things. Here.
For our younger audience that isn't familiar with, that is a newspaper. They're
That's
really wonderful things that we miss.
The Cincinnati Enquirer. Yeah, you can't put anything online on your refrigerator. I know that much. Cincinnati.com is the website, highly popular. I'm at S Springer Sports on X/Twitter, and S Springer Sports on Instagram, I believe, also. So
awesome.
Thereabout I can be found, and we'll see what happens. I will be in the press box till the end of the game, though, trying to stay warm.
Godspeed to you, sir. I am sad to not make this road trip. I haven't gotten a chance to be up there at Nippert Stadium before, but maybe next go around when it's hopefully a little earlier this season, a little bit warmer. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your information and insight.
Thank you
for taking the time. I really do appreciate him doing that. It's a busy week. It's a holiday week. It takes effort to connect and do that kind of stuff. So thankful for Melissa doing those all year, and thankful for Scott participating in the midst of a particularly hectic week for football and family and everything else. All right, folks, it is late, but I did want to stop down just for a moment and talk about what TCU is doing on the recruiting trail, because if you haven't been paying attention, you may not know that TCU's 2025 football commit class has ballooned to 28 players. It's number 22 in the country, and they've added quite a few players recently. We talked about Terry Shelton, the 4-star wide receiver, last week. Since Terry Shelton committed 10 days ago, or 11 days ago, depending on when you're listening to this, TCU's added 3 more commits. They've added 3, in fact, in the last 3 days, starting on Monday with Kelton McKell, the defensive tackle out of Jones College in Ellisville, Mississippi. So a JUCO kid. He's the number 16 overall JUCO recruit for the 2025 class. He's the number 9 defensive lineman. He's 6'2", 300 pounds. Going to come in, help shore up TCU's interior defensive line. And he's not the only one, because on Tuesday, the Frogs landed Perry Cole, a JUCO D tackle out of Trinity Valley Community College over there in Athens, Texas, out in East Texas, Beast Texas, if you will. He's 6'3", 290. Both of those guys have 3 years to play. Pretty impressive that you're getting 2 guys with 3 years to play, plus you've got 4 other defensive linemen already in this class. 5 other defensive linemen already in this class. TCU is loading up in the trenches, and it is a beautiful thing to see. And then on Wednesday, they added Jonah Martinez, a defensive back from Long Beach City College, same JUCO as Matt Bozen, by the way, fun fact, to come in and provide some depth to that cornerback room. How concerned were we all about the cornerback room when Vernon Glover Jr. and Avery Helm both went down with injuries in the fall? Adding some depth to that room is going to be really important. Jonah Martinez is one of those guys. He had 3 picks in a single game this fall, so he's a ball hawk, and we'll see if his skills translate to the D1 level. Jonah is a kid who has picked up a bunch of offers recently. He got offers from Arizona, West Virginia, Florida was trying to get him on campus this weekend when he committed to TCU. All 3 of these JUCO guys pretty highly sought after. And it's interesting because the last few years under Sonny Dykes, we haven't really seen TCU hit the JUCO route very hard. There have been a couple guys, right, Channing Canada to name one, that have come in and had an impact and seen some playing time. But really it's been either transfers from D1 schools or high school. And I think what this is a signal of is they're kind of rediscovering this JUCO route to get younger depth pieces who can develop, maybe are a little bit ahead of some of those high school kids, to kind of keep your classes balanced, but also to not have to rely so heavily on transfer portal guys who are maybe going to command a little bit more money, are going to be here for less time, maybe 1-year guy, 2-year guy at best. So I think this is a signal of a couple things. I think there's been some concern from TCU fans over the last few years with the amount of transfer portal players TCU has gone after, and there's a reason for that, right? We've talked about it on the show before. Sonny looked around at the roster and realized that there were going to be a couple of years there where he was going to have to go portal some stopgap pieces, especially along the offensive line. That's why they've replaced 4 starters along the offensive line the last 2 years. That's not going to be the case in 2025. Similar for the defensive line. They're losing 3 guys off the defensive line this year, but they're not losing very many ends. They're mostly in the interior. And what have they gone and done? They've gone and gotten 4 interior defensive linemen in this recruiting class alone. But in order to prevent that from being 4 freshmen, go hit 2 JUCO guys who are talented. Both of those JUCO guys have big SEC, Big Ten offers on their plates as well, and they've chosen to come to TCU. means they're probably getting a good amount of NIL, but maybe not as much as a Dom Williams would have commanded on the open market, if you know what I'm saying. So really like the strategy here, and I think it's an indicator that TCU is a little bit further along in the development cycle than they've been these past 2 seasons, which is how it should be. We should be seeing progress in that regard. We should see some of these high school kids who were recruited 2-3 years ago really stepping into some significant roles, and we have. Jamel Johnson is one, Marcus Deal is one, Ben Taylor Whitfield is one, Josh Hoover is one, right? So some of these younger guys are starting to step into significant roles. We're going to continue to see that in 2025, and now we're going to start to see TCU maybe supplement with JUCO and the portal a little bit differently than we've seen in the first few years, where they were really dependent upon that for starters now. Instead, when you bring 4 guys back along the offensive line, not including Cade Bennett, who will be back next year, now you can look around and say, well, instead of having to pay 4 offensive line in the portal, we can go get 1 tackle, spend a little bit more, get a tackle to come in here and maybe shore up one of those spots. We can spend a little bit more to go get a wide receiver in the portal. We can spend a little bit more to get a defensive lineman from an LSU or something like that. That's not a hint. I'm just throwing out a random school. But you see what I'm getting at here. The reliance on the portal is waning, I think, slightly because of what TCU has been able to do in the high school recruiting ranks over the last couple of years. We're starting to see that come to fruition now, and I think 2025 will be a really big year where we see that pop a little bit more. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you're looking forward to that as well, because I think it's going to mean really good things for TCU in the long run. So that's something to think about as we kind of get towards portal season, because, December 4th is coming up, early signing period. Most of these kids in this class are going to be signed up and locked down at that point in time. A lot of these kids are early enrollees as well. Jeremy and I will have a lot more on that over at Horned Frog Blitz 24/7 Sports, and then Melissa and I will be breaking it all down on next week's midweek episode once signing day has come and gone. So keep an eye out for all of that sweet content over at Horned Frog Blitz and at Frogs Insider. That's going to do it, though, for this very late night episode of the Frogs Insider podcast presented by the Flying T Club. Go over to flyingtclub.com. Give a shout out to the Dave Campbell's Texas folks as well. And we will be back for a post-holiday, post-Cincinnati podcast recap. And then we'll figure it out from there. We'll know where TCU's going bowling. We'll have some more details about all of that. Melissa and I are probably both going to be there. If there's some sort of Frogs Insider meetup that we want to do, that would be pretty fun. Just saying, would be pretty cool. Maybe I'll still have a mustache. It's kind of growing on me, literally and figuratively. But until next time, friends, we will talk to you later. Go Frogs.